Hi, this is Shan Mantri. I'm a GP on the Bain CCG board and I'm clinical lead for the Map of Medicine project. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about maps, which is one of the parts of the Map of Medicine, explaining a bit about what they are, how to access them, and how they can be useful. So let's kick off by just showing you one of our clinical maps. And if you've ever used Map of Medicine before, this would look quite familiar to you. So if I just bring up a map that I'd already loaded up, this is one of our local maps on the new back pain pathway. And as you can see, it is quite simply a clinical flowchart. So we have at the top a particular condition, and we've got back pain here, and you follow down the boxes and the arrows and it will tell you what you should be doing for these patients in any given scenario. The boxes are color coded and those colors do actually mean something. So green is equal to primary care, red are red flags, a light blue, what we have here, is intermediate care, and we do have at the bottom, dark blue, which is secondary care, and orange is self-management. And you can see along here is the key for those different colours. When you're using these clinical maps, you will see that some of them have a little eye next to them, and that simply means that there is more information about that box. And if you click, it brings up more information. Now this information can be simply text, it can be web links, and it can be attached documents or PDFs. So if you do see an eye, it may be helpful to click on it or hover over it and see what extra information there is. So let's close that down. So as you can see, it's all quite straightforward. You can follow this pathway down, you get to this point and it tells you that they'll either go this way, or this way. And it's all quite self-explanatory. When we're looking at maps, obviously I brought this up myself, you can access maps in different ways. You can access it through Sidebar, which I've got here, but you can also access it through a web browser. So these clinical maps can be looked at home or any PC that has an internet access. So let me just close this map down first. So in order to access maps, if I first show you through Sidebar, because that's probably the easiest, so let's make Sidebar a little bit bigger. You can access it in two ways. One is by clicking on this button, which essentially just browses the Map of Medicine. So if I click on here, what it does is then it takes me to the Map of Medicine homepage. Because I'm logged in on Sidebar, it knows who I am, and it knows the current view is Bain CCG, and so this is the home page I would have. So if I move it down, we'll get to this part, which is our local care maps. And on here we've got, I can just show all, which shows us all the different maps that we've got. Move that up. Here you can see all the different maps that we've got so far, and as you can see, here is back pain. So I can click on that to access it. If you have Sidebar, a much easier way of accessing a particular map, if I close that, is actually to use a search box. So if I type in back pain, press return, here we see back pain, and if I click on there, the same map comes up here. There we go. So that's using Sidebar, which, as I said, it makes it very, very easy. If I close that down, you can actually access those maps, however, through a web browser, and you do that by, let me just close Sidebar down. Let's open up my browser. I've got Chrome, and the address you need to go to is www.mapofmedicine.com. I press return. it takes me to the Map of Medicine homepage. Now, because I'm accessing it through a browser, maybe I'm at home or maybe I'm on a computer that doesn't have sidebar, I do need to log in. So you do that by clicking on Access via Athens. So don't use SmartCard, use Access via Athens. And if you click on there, and you'll be taken here. And at this point, you need to put in your email address and your password, which I'm hoping have been issued to you if you have access to Sidebar. And if you aren't someone that's already had Sidebar installed and you don't actually have this, then it would be well worth going through your practice manager, and they can contact us at the CCG in order to issue you an email address or password, and we can set that up for you. So you put those details in, and essentially you just log on. Okay, so I've just logged in, and as you can see, I've come to the same home page as I had when I accessed it through Sidebar, and we can see here local care maps. If I show all, we see all these different maps that I showed you before, and here we have the back pain map, which I showed you originally. We click on here, we get to the same page. Here we are. So if you see up here, it knows who I am because I've logged in, and it's got the current view as BAME CCG. So as I said, you can access maps in different ways, and because it's tied to an account, it will remember what things you've looked at. One thing that can be of help is that if you are looking at a particular map or maps on a regular basis, you have the ability to bookmark it. So if I click that button, all that means is that it's stored there as a bookmark. It's quite similar to bookmarking a web page. So for those maps that you might be looking at more frequently, it may be worth putting a bookmark in, saves you having to search for it, and I'll show you how you access that perhaps through Sidebar. The other thing to bear in mind is that, which I probably didn't mention before, is when you're looking at these different boxes, if you click on them, there is always the ability to add notes to it, and this is important from a appraisal perspective, because if you see a particular map and you want to add comments about it, the system will remember those comments, and you can then produce those at the end of the year and use it for your appraisal. So you can type something in here on notes, which is next to the quick info. Going on about appraisal, there is a professional development box here which can be of help. So if I click on here, what it does do is this allows me to download what maps I've been looking at over a period of time, which gives evidence for my appraisal about continuing professional development. So from here it says from what date. So if I say from the 1st of January to the 24th of February, which is today, and it says include my notes. So any notes you've made on any of those maps that I showed you, it will include those and just generate my report. So it will produce a Map of Medicine report to say, so here we have who I am and dates covered and how many maps I've looked at. I haven't put any notes on any of the care maps, but it then lists what maps I've looked at, when did I look at them. So again, it's helpful from a appraisal perspective just to evidence keeping up to date. So that's quite useful. So let's go back to home. So let's go back to home. As you recall, slightly earlier I bookmarked back pain, and next to local maps we have back pain. So click on there, takes me back. Let's go back to the home. One thing I probably do need to be a bit clear on in terms of Map of Medicine is the difference between what we call local maps and international maps. So local maps, which we've got listed here, are simply maps that we have done locally as BANES. As a CCG, we have taken maps that have been produced by other organisations and made them local. So we've added local content, and what I would always say is if there is a local map, you do look at that first, because it tends to have more up-to-date info for our area. There are, however, what they term international maps, which, although it may not necessarily be as obvious here, but if I close this down and bring sidebar up, let's do that. And here you have local, but you also have international. So international maps are essentially maps that have been produced by the Map of Medicine themselves. They are things that cover much more broadly topics, tend to be much heavier, more reference, tend to be a bit more complicated. So for example, we had a low back pain map, but there's a low back pain for Map of Medicine. So if I click on that one, this is a Map of Medicine map. So as you can see, it tends to be a lot more wordy, a lot more in depth. So it can be helpful in a particular area, and I would liken it a bit to perhaps looking on GP Notebook or patient.co.uk professional resource. Can be useful in particular areas, but perhaps not as useful locally for local services. But it's just something to bear in mind, that distinction between what's local and what's international. So let's close that. So let's go back to sidebar, and as you recalled before, and I'll talk about this in sidebar, that I bookmarked a particular map, and as you can see, I've just done that button which refreshes it, and now we've got that pane here, so it does remember. So because it's tied to your account, doesn't matter where you're using it, it does remember what you've looked at, and that can be helpful when you're planning appraisals or trying to find something you've looked at before, because there is a history option. And that does sort of cover maps. I've only shown you one map. As you can see, there are quite a few maps here, and what the map I've already shown you is a very clinical map. If I perhaps show you a slightly different map, this is a map we've done recently to do with hematuria with urologists, and again it's all quite straightforward about when you should refer and whom you should refer to. One thing I didn't mention before was you don't have to go through the home screen, you can simply search for a particular map. So I know that we've got a map on Emerson's Green, so if I type in Emerson's, it comes up. The thing with the search, and you'll see search within the sidebar, is that it will search for any word within the map, whether it be in the text or the title, that has that word in it. So it can be quite helpful to run searches. You might find things you didn't realise. So Emerson's Green map is slightly different. It essentially is just information about what you can refer to Emerson's Green. So for example, if I clicked on ear, nose and throat, it tells me what there's a button here that for the exclusion criteria and what procedures are done, and the ENT procedures, and it just lists it. And we have attached some PDFs, so if I click on that button for detailed info, it loads up a particular PDF page. So really and truly, that's all I really wanted to talk about in terms of maps. It's quite user friendly. I would suggest that once you have a login, to go in, have a look around, and if you did have suggestions for particular maps that we could do or information we could put on there, please let me know.